Hi, folks. Hope you're doing well today. For the last 12 centuries, poetry has been the principal medium of expression for the denizens of Iran Shah. More often than not, it was usually our only means of expressing dissent against the establishment, against society and its values, against the government, against the clergy, the monarchy, and so on and so forth. Music as well, but more often than not, it was usually a poem from some of the most famous writers of our heritage that was set to music by either the artist or his or her ghostwriters. Many of our poets also tended to be philosophers and theologians too. Iran today could very well be the only country in the world where you'd be hard pressed to not find a single home without at least one book of poems in it. There are a variety of topics when it comes to poetry. Some poets wrote about the hair and eyes and body of a beloved. Some wrote about the joy of lovers meeting to drink and dance and celebrate life and living in general. Some wrote with the explicit intent of guiding us in life with attitudes and mindsets to adopt and solutions for how to solve real-world problems. Some wrote about devotion to God and the cosmos. These poems may have been written by Persians or by Kurds, or by Afghans, or by Tajiks. What does it matter? We're all from the same culture. Or, for that matter, by Persianized Arabs, Turks, Yugoslavs, Indians, and Albanians. But none of these represent the kind of poetry or the kind of song lyrics that our overlords want. Poetry, in general, had its opponents in two camps. The first was our own treacherous, ethnomasochistic, and xenophilic elite who converted, who suspected Iran Shah's nativist poets of using the art form as a thinly veiled means of restoring Zoroastrianism, restoring Asha, and undermining the political and cultural dominance of foreign invaders who didn't know us, who didn't actually like or respect us, who thought of our own ethnic heritage as well as their own as ignorant and evil. The second was the clergy of the day, who viewed poets as subversive elements within the state, who sought to stop the ascent of Arabic as the lingua franca and only language to be used and spoken among Muslims. If you take anything out of this talk, make it this. Poetry stopped the linguistic ascent of Arabic and also Turkish in West Asia, and paved the way for an eventual Zoroastrian restoration, the formative basis of a Dharmanation movement in Iran in the pre-modern era. In fact, almost all of Iran's most iconic and definitive poets from the 9th century onwards, and most iconic nativist poets of the past century, everyone you can think of, Hafez, Sa'di, Rumi, Nizami, Ferdowsi, they're either censored or ignored by the pro-Zionist establishment that discredits almost everything we ever did, or in rare cases, totally banned. Moreover, the last remaining nativist poets of any consequence who are still alive are all in exile. In the early stages, the poets of Iran Shah started their works with laudatory remarks and panegyrics towards whatever Islamic ruler was their patron, and then quickly proceeded to the real themes of their poems from there. Despite their thinly veiled, you need to read between the lines and get the pagan metaphors writing style, the authorities from time to time did manage to detect what their poems were really about, and some poets wound up imprisoned or exiled, canceled, as we would put it in today's jargon, or forced to spend the rest of their lives in hardship and poverty, being poorly paid, poorly rewarded, and poorly recognized for the fruits of their own labor, and deliberately so by the establishment. Very rarely, however, were poets ever put to the sword for their writings. This is the first lifetime of human history where poets have been executed on such a large scale and in such a significant capacity just for what they wrote. In some cases, they were told what they could and couldn't write about beforehand by their overlords, implicitly or explicitly, but they were never demanded by law on what they had to write about, or else there would be hell to pay. Their efforts have failed and will continue to fail because both poetry and music have a magical genius about them that defies all attempts at fixed and rigid definitions, let alone dictation from someone else. This has been the only human lifetime where rulers of societies have tried to actually dictate to poets, musicians, songwriters, filmmakers, and so on and so forth, and accuse them of whatever straw men they come up with. Traitors, extremists, infidels, depending on the restaurant. Several of these dictators, gatekeepers, and gaslighters have been failures and amateurs in the field themselves, complete talentless hacks themselves, who just so happens to achieve political power and clout and cope with their own failings and mediocrity by harming the careers of others. Without the early Persian poets, beginning from the generation of Rudaki and onwards, Iranics would most likely have ended up like the Egyptians, who lost their native language and faith and became Arabic speakers and full-blown Muslims, save for the Coptic minority. Iran-Shah would have gone the way of ancient Sumer. The poetry of the Kurds, the Ossetians, the Baluchis, and Pashtuns serves the same purpose today in our current era against their current overlords, too. It's the key to the survival of their heritages, too. The same is the case for pretty much every endangered minority and endangered demographic, and ever since this art form started stagnating, we've started to stagnate. A comeback is expected of it, and this is where I end my dissertation. Thank you for watching.